we had EQ settings that we really liked. Is it the first one, or we'll look at the scenes here. I have like initial band settings, a Z.
How have you been doing, Jeff, on settings for EQ? Have you been doing much with that yet?
Not really.
Okay.
On some of them I have adjusted the pulpit mic.
Yeah.
Because sometimes it has too much bass and it kind of reverberates.
Yep. Also, that'll make it sound muddy too a lot of
Yeah.
times,
Yeah.
which we don't want. So what I'll do here is I'm going to first just go back to a setting. I'm just going to pick one of these marked settings, like 3.9 for instance. And I'll show you the general process for saving and recalling in and out of the library. Then after that, I want to talk quickly about the EQ in general. And then I want to talk about the high-pass filter, which is my favorite part of the EQ. So real quick, the library, when we're in the EQ settings here, we can always view the EQ. And whenever you're looking at just one piece, it makes the library function a little bit easier to deal with. The utility button is how we get stuff in and out of the library. So if I click that utility, then we see our library sets of presets come up. From here, we can scroll through them. We can save to any slot, and we can recall from any slot. And also, we can select which piece of the mixer do we want to be saving and recalling. If I clicked View on the equalizer to begin with, it automatically just deals with the equalizer. If we didn't have the EQ viewed and we went to the library, we'd be looking at everything all together. And that's nice because you can save an entire channel's worth of information into the library. Right now, we really just want to be looking at the equalizer. So if I want to save EQs into the library, what I do is I find a mic that I really like the EQ about. So let's say this one here, it just is perfect for this keyboard microphone. This is a really good setting, and I want to use this whenever they go to different microphones. First step of that puzzle is just to save it into the library. So I'd have it viewed, I'd click Utility, it shows up my library here, and I can save it into an open slot. Save, preset, delete, copy, paste, same features is kind of all around there. I'm going to save it, and then I can name it Key Voice. Right now I'm just going to call it KV, which is going to be confusing later, I'm sure. Well, I suppose.
Mic is that one?
I just picked the keyboard, but
Keyboard wired mic.
yeah.
You just put Gloria in there. She's just sitting there.
No,
Then we know.
hopefully not all the time.
Oh, we know which one it is.
Yeah, I know.
I guess one of the questions I have,
Yep.
Johnny, about EQ is that when you left the board, most all of the EQ was negative.
Yes, and that's the next thing I was going to talk about.
And either it's my ear, but other people have agreed with me,
Yep.
that if we don't put some of this up here,
Yep.
there's no body in it. It sounds flat. The keyboard doesn't have any life.
Gotcha. In general, when it comes to equalizing settings, it's all relationship-wise. So if I took the whole EQ structure and added 5 decibels of a certain chunk of frequencies, and then turned that entire channel down 5 decibels, it would be the same thing as if I had cut the rest of the frequencies all by 5 decibels. It's all relative is what I was trying to say.
Mm-hmm.
In general, it's better to cut than it is to add. When you start adding things, they can definitely conflict with more. They can conflict with each other more. The chance for that is greater. And in general, whenever we're talking about equalization, we want to start by cutting and then do the adding last.
So instead of adding here, we should be cutting here and here,
Yes. Yep.
and then raise the whole gain level.
Yep. So, with that being said, in general, if we're talking to studio people, live people, they're going to say cut before you boost. And also, whenever you want to boost something, the first thing you try to think about is, can I cut everything else first? So when you're in a studio and you say to the guy, my mic needs to be brighter, what they usually do is they start by turning down the lower stuff to make it seem brighter in relationship. So that's the textbook answer. The other answer is, if it sounds good to your ear, that's the way I want you guys to do it. And there's really no problem with boosting. That's why they give it to you there. When I was looking at your file, I did notice a lot of these channels were boosted.
Yeah.
And that's something that stuck out to me. Like, this isn't horrible, but when you start boosting a lot, it can become... The problem is, the reason why they don't want you boosting a lot is because they interfere differently when you boost them. But more importantly, you're eating up the channel's headroom in the digital realm. You can always add gain to the channel, which gives you more headroom overall. But the channel, the DSP, the computer that runs the channel, only has so much headroom inside of its own window. And when you add in the equalization, you're not adding gain later. What you're doing is eating up the channel's DSP headroom. So it's kind of technical, and I'm sorry for saying that kind of stuff. But in general, it's better to cut than to boost. And if you are going to boost, don't be boosting a whole lot, because you'll eat up the headroom of the channel's DSP.
Here's a good example right here. This one right here.
Yep.
If you take this signal and say, okay, I really want to get more out of this, you could actually cause a flattening of this in the headroom of the amplifier.
Yeah.
And now you got a distortion point that you've now created, where if everything is negative, you're not going to hit that distortion point by just increasing
Like that.
gain.
Yep. So this here, our top boosting points are 10 decibels above 0. So that means that our mic is going to distort at least 10 decibels earlier than it would have if I hadn't been doing all that boosting. So that means that we lose headroom out of the computer part of the puzzle. Not necessarily out of the preamp, which is
So-
where we want to get our headroom from.
So what do we do to make this mic sound the same
Yep.
as it does now, only in a cut form?
So when you got the low spot here,
Exactly. I would just,
that becomes a low spot here.
there's the horizontal plane, which is 0. In my head, I just move that whole horizontal plane upwards. And so these will be the 0 points now, and we'll be doing a little bit of cutting there, a lot of cutting there, and a lot of cutting in the other places. Basically, just move our reference 0 upwards. That's the right way to do it. If this sounds good, though, and we're not eating up tons of the headroom, it's not unheard of.
We've
to do
had
it.
situations where Cindy says, I don't have any more gain.
Yeah, and that's probably why, because
You know.
I've been the one that has been
Well, I've
boosting.
done it too.
Yeah.
So-
because, I mean,
I haven't
we got
messed
Because it
Nyla
sounds good.
sounding,
Well, this is not,
I don't
this
know how
is
to do it.
Nyla's setting, and that's why I said that makes her sound,
But at
Good.
Easter,
Fuller,
we
Right.
couldn't hear her.
And that
So
explains why. So that's one
Right.
big question right there. That's good.
But doing the cutting,
Yep.
you could now say, Nyla, I want to add just more gain to you from this point.
And then your high point that would normally cause distortion is much lower on the scale.
Yeah.
And so we're going to be bringing the entire channel's gain structure up rather than just the part that distorted before. Because that would hit the clipping point long before the rest of it did. So that I was actually going to mention that when it came, because I noticed that you guys had done a lot of boosting rather than cutting. So when I talked about the EQs, that is something I wanted to mention. It really is no problem if it sounds good. That's the main big important piece. So if it ends up sounding the best that way, go for it. But in general, to maximize the gain structure, we want to be doing most cuts and little boosts.
Another question for you.
Yes.
I noticed when there's two different things. What does it mean
Yes.
right here? The
Yep.
gray versus the yellow.
Yep. So yellow means this is what's engaged right now. Gray means this is what the filter's doing, but it's not actually engaged. So it's like a bypass switch on an analog equalizer. So if it's gray, that means the equalizer would have those settings, but the bypass switch would be pressed in.
so it's not doing it.
It's not doing anything.
It's only doing this,
Yep.
this part.
The reason why this part is still yellow is because there's actually two equalizers. And the second equalizer is something I definitely wanted to mention with you. It's very handy on dealing with mud and low frequency stuff. It's the high pass filter, or they call it a low cut, excuse me. The EQ is just 4 bands of general control, and on the mix outputs you get 6 bands of control. The low cut is its own beast. The low cut just gets rid of everything up to a certain point. The reason why we don't send most channels to the sub is because most of our inputs don't have any bass content. The voices really don't. Most things don't really have a lot of low end content. So it actually will clean it up and get rid of a lot of mud if we just get rid of all those low frequencies on almost all the channels. That's the low cut's job. It really only has one adjustment, and that's what frequency do you want it to cut below. If I change this, you'll notice that the yellow part here just goes up and down. And it's basically just getting rid of
Pulls it along.
everything below there. When I'm doing stuff with a digital mixer, I start with all my voices to have a high pass filter or a low cut at about 200 hertz.
There's a high cut on this
Yep.
too.
Yep. And you do the exact same thing on the top. The high cut isn't as used because obviously we want a lot of that high frequency content.
I know when we looked at Nyla's, well, Nyla doesn't have any frequencies down here, you know.
Yep. The scale of the equalizer is set up in octaves, and so it's a little deceiving when you see all this content is missing. That's because those wavelengths are very long, so they take up a lot of room in the equalizer. But it's actually most of the audio information happens up in here. Most stuff that we can actually hear is up in here, with the bass content being down in there. So almost all channels, I apply some sort of low-cut filter, and it's really all about the ear. You listen to it while you're spinning it up.
Just look at.
I'm going to turn this back on before we leave it.
See all that's on instead of that base there.
Yep, so we're going to select it.
Yep.
And so this is the bass. This is a fairly common bass equalizer, especially for matching it with a kick drum. So bass and a kick drum have to coexist very much together because they kind of are both full range and they eat up a lot of the same peak frequencies. So in this world, you've got the bass guitar, you've got the high pass filter at about 48 hertz, which is very common. You're getting rid of the lowest rumble notes of the bass guitar, and you're adding and fattening up a lot of that lower middle stuff, which is a lot of what the bass guitar is missing. And generally, if I was doing this alongside of a kick drum, which is the two that compete most each other, bass and kick, I would kind of complement each other. I would build a hole in one, and I would fill it with the other.
Here's the kick.
Yep. So it's kind of what we're doing here, except for the top end. We'll start by looking at the bass guitar. Basically, the bass guitar, where we want that fat middle from it, that fat lower middle, and then we want some of the brightness, the attack of the instrument coming out on top. And the kick drum, then normally I would put a bell curve right in here, the low end of it, the doo doo doo, and up in here would be the click of the kick drum, that sound. And so the kick drum would usually just kind of live in these holes that we're missing right there. It'd be nice to hear the kick drum while we're setting this. Sorry. So this kick drum, normally I would bring out the click
Yeah,
with
I was
this
gonna kick her.
number 3. Yep, that's no problem at all. And then also I would be getting some low frequency content from here too. Also the kick drum and the bass guitar I'd normally send to the sub, and right now they're not sent to the sub. The bass is, excuse me, but the kick drum is not. So we'll listen to it real quick. We'll see what we can do here.
Should be.
Yep. Okay, so we've got the kick drum selected. We're sending to the main bus. Not really hearing it. It is assigned to the mains. So just gotta keep looking here.
Until it's assigned to the mains there.
Yep, the stereo bus is how you assign it to the mains. So why are we not getting it out there? The drums are unmuted. I've got it cranked pretty much wide open. Oh, there's a gate on it. That's why what's going on. Alright, let's deal with that gate first.
Something changed.
Yep.
It was you, John.
Keep going. Keep giving us that kick drum.
Gloria's going to take over.
Okay. Nice and strong.
Record it.
I'm going to change this to a bell curve. Coming along. Let's low cut up a little bit. And then we're going to bring out this. And we're going to kind of do the opposite of
Do the
what
powwow.
the bass guitar was doing here.
You're on a warpath.
And then we will.
Use the other leg. Takes a lot of muscle in your leg.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's normally how I'd set up that. Now, if we were listening to the bass guitar along with it, I'll look at the EQ here. See how we're cutting here and we're boosting there and there.
If you need the bass, I can go get it.
And it should complement the bass guitar,
It's upstairs.
which
It's
is
upstairs.
boosting there and cutting there.
Okay.
Well, he would adjust it a little bit.
When we're EQing the
I don't know how
bass,
to
this
put
is
it.
going to change when you have a different drummer up there, obviously. But the main things are I've got the compressor running, which is getting rid of the top of the kick drum's headroom, excuse me. So as it kicks, it just kind of rolls off the initial impact of it. And then I'm adding the low end with the low frequency. I've got a low bell curve doing the low one here at about 80 hertz. And then I'm using this high middle at 2.27, which is bringing out the click sound, that sound. I didn't get a lot of the click sound, and it could be mic placement, it could be what it's beating against. But this is where I'd pull out that click sound normally, between 2 and 3K. Yep. The click sound is a technical term for a kick drum. There's two parts to the kick drum sound. There's the woo, woo, woo. That's the body of it. And then the click is the attack of it. That sound. A lot of people don't think of the second part, because when they think of a kick drum, they think of the low end stuff.
Yeah.
But it's really important to have that percussive attack to the kick drum. The kick drum is much more full range than what we think. Most people think it's just the boom, boom, boom. But the top part of it's equally important. And that's what we call
Wish I could hear that.
click. And so I actually brought that out a little bit. And that's really important when you're dealing with the bass guitar, that those two kind of accent each other. They
So
live in each other's peaks and valleys.
let's take this one step farther now.
Yes.
Taking and saving this EQ
Yep.
into
Yeah.
the library so we don't lose it.
Yep. Somebody want to walk us through that?
Yeah. No, I don't want to do it. I want to see you do it.
Okay. So it makes it easier if we have viewed the part that we want to deal with. If we don't have that viewed, it'll just deal with the entire channel. So since we're just thinking about the EQ, I'm going to view it first. Then utility brings up the library.
Utility.
And then from there we can save. We can scroll and save.
So,
Yep.
So you gotta name it
say
then.
there.
Yep.
Kick drum.
Kick drum.
Yep. I'm going to call it kick drum.
Will that be saved in all the scenes then, or just this particular
That'll be
scene?
saved globally.
Globally,
The
okay.
library is the one thing that doesn't actually exist inside of scenes.
Okay.
The library is global.
So
Okay.
whenever you come to a new scene, you'll always have the same kick.
And you won't have the
the
same
EQ.
kick sound, but you'll have it in the library so you can pull it
Yeah,
into
so
there.
That's
if
exactly
we need
what
to
we want.
start from someplace, we go get that from the library and say, here is,
So
Think of it like a
if we
library.
don't change it, it will be in one scene to the next scene to the
Yes.
next scene. But if
Yes.
somebody
Yep.
changed it in a scene,
Right.
we can
The
get
ne-
back to that.
yeah, if someone changed it in a scene, then, and then we would have no change from then on.
Could I ask how you go
Unless-
back in and get it?
So I will show nice. The changes will stay in the scenes, but the utility library will never change. The library is on its own. So if you guys can watch this here, if I want to get back to it, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to reset this here. It's going to say, "Are you sure you want to do that?" Say sure. What I'm going to do is same deal here. If I want to just deal with the equalizer, I'd view it first, and then utility.
And that's what it's currently set.
Yep, reset.
Right now it is.
Yep.
Utility.
Utility.
Kick drum.
I would find the one I want. I'd say okay.
Number 13.
Oh yeah, 13 kick drum. That's the one I want.
Yeah.
And then the last step would be to load it. And it's going to say, "Are you sure about that?" I say, "Yep, it's back there."
And then you'd save the scene with that now, right?
As long
So that
as
would
this
save
is
it in
on
there?
here and that view is on.
Yes, you have to have the channel selected, and you don't have to have the view selected, but if you don't have the view selected, you'll be
It'll save
doing
all that
all of
stuff.
the pieces of the puzzle.
No, we don't want to do that now.
Now, you can also add pieces. So let's say I've got my kick drum, I want to save it, but I also want to save my compressor setting, because that was pretty crucial
yeah.
to that.
Yeah.
I can add that to the things I'm saving to. So now if I resave it, I'll be saving the EQ and the compressor
To 13 too.
to 13. Yep. And they'll also show you what's saved in there with these little pictures here.
So
Yep. So high pass filter, equalizer.
you probably would want to save the
Threshold.
gate value then too.
Yep. And I
even
took
though
out the
it-
gate.
Even though it's not viewed, but save it so that when we bring it back,
It'll still
It's-
move it back.
it's
But he took the
back
gate,
to
he-
this
yeah,
point.
He said he took the gate out. But
But even if somebody moved it and we went back
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
setting,
so-
that gate would still stay the same without
Yep.
being
And the same
saved.
and the same thing, you can save pieces. You can also recall just a couple pieces. Let's say we saved everything, but then we wanted to recall it and we only wanted the EQ to come back. We can just select which piece we recall it as well.
Oh, okay.
So the library is very handy. The library exists for effects. You can save effect settings. You can save any of the channel settings. Library is very handy to store stuff in that you want to get back later, or stuff that's going to be used on multiple channels.
Is that where we're going to save individual EQs of singing voices on a mic?
Sure. You could have Bill's settings, Mary's settings.
How many places
I think
to
you get
save all that
100.
in there.
So let's double check.
Oh, wow.
That's way plenty.
Yep, 100.
Okay. So just like the scene settings, we got 100 scenes and we got 100.
So you just gotta name the singers and the mic they're singing with and put it in the library.
Yep.
Now, if it
So-
was a one-person thing, they were going to sing it, and then the next week they weren't going to be around, you don't have to build a library for them. But if it's a person that's here all the time, and you have a great sound for them, why not put it in a library?
Right.
Be very easy to do, and you have them then forever. No matter what happens, you got a setting saved somewhere for them.
And it's based on a single mic, though, right? It's a single channel.
It's based on the microphone channel and the mic that you're using. Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Because when you recall it, it reassigns it back to that.
To
So I'm
that
so
same-
sorry. I'm not explaining it very well. It's based on. It definitely depends on the microphone because that's part of the sound structure.
Right.
But it'll recall it to anywhere you have selected.
Oh, so you could put them in any mic.
Yeah, it doesn't have to go to the same channel, and it's not going to go to the same channel unless you have it selected.
How much of a difference would that make, putting them on a different mic?
Well, now,
Quite a bit, because the mic actually has a lot to do with
but
what it
right
sounds
now,
like.
but
yes.
right now, what I get her, you know, she's talking about if she saved the settings for Keith on red,
Yep.
and she put me on
Yep, so let's
this
say we-
channel,
Yep. Let's say we got red. We're
Yeah.
going to save it.
save it. Then we could save it for me on blue,
Yep.
so I could be on blue.
Right.
So you could
So
select
you could
blue
have Keith
and load
blue,
it.
Keith red.
But he's saying that'll make a difference if
Well, it
they're
will
in different.
because if you were to save that setting over here to
Purple or
to
violet?
purple, that's a different mic.
Yep.
Yeah, and the
Since these
dynamics
mics
of
are
that.
assigned to channels.
Yep.
So are you saying the mic is going to change the
So-
sound?
Yes.
Now you could assign Keith red to purple, but then you might have to minor adjust it
Exactly.
because that mic element might not be the same.
Same.
And what I actually meant by what I might have spoke a little too much there. What I meant by that is if you had a different type of microphone room.
Oh, okay.
If they're the same mic, they're going to sound sonically similar.
Yeah.
They're going to have their own individual characteristics, which you'll notice because the elements change over time. But most of the mic elements will be similar to each other. So if you're going from an SM58 wired mic to a wireless Samsung microphone, those are going
Okay.
to be very different sounding.
But all of our wireless mics are the same except for one, right?
Yep, exactly. Also, if you just want to copy channels
It's got a
around,
different amp.
It's got a different bonnet.
Yep.
The red
Okay.
one does.
Yeah.
if you are going to just move channels around, you don't have to also save it into the library. There are simple copy-paste features as well, where you're not going to save it into a library setting, but you can still copy it from here and paste it over here and paste it there. So if we set one person's mic and it sounds great, we can quickly copy it and paste it in lots of places. With the same place, utility, but instead of saving it in the library, we can just hit copies and paste as well.
I guess the idea is to have all the singers have a profile for an equalization.
Yep.
And when they come in to practice,
Load it up,
from
yeah.
the library, you can say
Yep.
they're going to be on this mic, and that's the one they normally use.
Yep.
But next week somebody else is on this mic, so you pull them in.
And if it was me doing it, I wouldn't even limit myself to just the equalizer. I would build them an entire profile with all pieces. With the preamp set right, with the compressor set right, with the equalizer sets. Those three pieces at least, if we save all those as one library setting, if they have the same microphone, no matter where you put it, it'll sound the exact same then. Because your preamp will be the same, and your compressor will also be limited from the same.
See, we're getting a lot of inconsistency just between the different technicians up here, and we're trying to get consistent.
Gotcha.
So,
So that's why we would like to use the library that says the
Got it.
library
Yep.
is for this person on this mic or on a different similar of mic.
Yep.
right.
But
So you, yeah.
we don't have to re-EQ them every
single week.
time.
You could have all these settings saved for me, and then when you come in, you just load that into the mic
Yeah.
you hand me.
Yep.
How sweet would that be, huh?
Yeah.
So
That's what I thought we had the capability
Yeah.
of
Yep.
doing.
I want to mention a couple other things, since this was questionable when I first came, is how to route to the mains and the subs.
Yes.
Any channel, just like we can change stuff when we select it, this is also part of the thing that we can change. And these are kind of our main outputs here. We've got two main outputs, that's why it's called main bus up here. And these are the assigned buttons right here. So let's say that we've got a vocal microphone. Let's say we've got our vocal 1. We can assign it to the main speakers, which is what all of these should be assigned to. Just want to make sure, because a second ago one of them wasn't. They should all be at least assigned to the mains.
Okay, but your kick drums,
Yep, still assigned to the mains.
well, there were some of them that were
Oh, you had one that wasn't.
this one here.
Nope, still assigned to the mains.
Well, it's signed to both of them.
That's okay. The mains is just this bottom button.
So that,
Yeah, that's the.
The top button is the sub.
yeah.
And the sub has two, well actually I'll show you they both have two controls. So first of all, we're not in stereo here, but if we were in stereo, the main also has a pan left and right. That's what this knob here is for. So we can take any channel and assign it to the mains, or assign it to the mains slightly left, slightly right, hard left, hard right. The sub also has two controls. Like for instance, we have the kick drum, which we were assigning to the sub. This button assigns it to the sub over here, and then this knob up here assigns how much goes to the sub.
And now it's turned all the way down.
Yep.
So
So
it's not doing us any good at all.
not in the sub right now. We're just coming through the mains.
Is that like a gain button then?
It's an output volume for the subs. Same way it would be a slider. Like
Okay.
on a mixer, this is the main send. We can turn the mains on and off, assign it. We can also change how much volume there is to the mains.
Okay.
Kind of the same thing for the subs. We can turn the subs on and off for that channel, and we can turn the subs up or down for that channel. Why that's important is because most channels we don't want to send to the sub. We want to keep most content out of that sub, so it can just focus on the low frequency stuff and not get
But you're talking bass guitars and,
Yeah.
and drums and
keyboards,
keyboards, things like that.
anything that needs to have that low frequency content in there. Voices definitely not, but anything that has that stuff. The full range, like returns, like CD players and computer players, those should all be assigned to the subs, which they are. So that's the main sends. We can send to the mains. We can stereo pan if we had a stereo image. We can send to the subs, and we can say how much goes to the subs. Following? Everybody's on the same
Yep.
page there?
Okay.
Yep.
I just noticed something